They are gone, no villages remain, no songs echo in the dark, only bones, buried in caves, scattered in forests, broken by time. And yet, when we search the code of life itself, we find them, in your skin, in your blood. 1 to 2% of who you are does not come from Homo sapiens at all. It comes from them. For more than 300,000 years, they ruled the frozen lands of Europe. They hunted mammoths, built shelters of bone and hide, painted caves in ochre and black. They buried their dead, cared for their weak, dreamed in symbols we still struggle to understand. We once called them brutes, cavemen beasts. But today we know the truth. They were human, our closest cousins. This is their story. The Neanderthals, children of the ice. Our ancient kin who still live within us. They were born into a world colder, harsher, and more unforgiving than ours. A world where glaciers moved like slow giants across the land, grinding mountains into dust, carving valleys with ice that gleamed blue in the faint light of a distant sun. Europe was not the gentle landscape we know today. It was a frontier of survival. Forests rose and fell with the changing climate. Rivers swelled and froze, their waters silenced for months at a time. Summers were brief interludes, little more than whispers between endless winters. And yet, even in this bleakness, life flourished. Mammoths marched in herds that shook the ground, their tusks arching toward the sky like ivory crescents. Woolly rhinoceroses armored in thick fur and hide thundered through the plains. Giant cave bears claimed the mouths of caverns, while lions larger than any alive today prowled the shadows. Hyenas laughed in the night, wolves hunted in packs that stretched across valleys, and eagles wheeled above, searching for the weak and the lost. It was into this crucible that the Neanderthals were forged. Their bodies bore the signature of the ice. Shorter than us, yet immensely powerful, they carried a strength honed by necessity. Their bones were thick, their muscles dense, their frames built to endure cold and hardship. A Neanderthal man might weigh as much as 90 kilograms. His chest broad and barrel-shaped, his lungs immense, capable of pulling life out of air as frigid as knives. Their noses were wide, designed to warm icy breath before it reached the lungs. Their jaws were strong, their teeth worn not only by food but by the constant work of gripping hides, breaking sinew, cracking bone. And behind those heavy brows, within those massive skulls, lay a brain as large as ours, sometimes larger. For too long, we dismissed them as brutes, incapable of thought or imagination. But the truth is different. The truth is that Neanderthals were not beasts. They were human. Imagine a winter's night 40,000 years ago. Snow drifts against the entrance of a cave. Inside, a fire crackles, light flickering across stone walls. A group huddles near the warmth, men and women, children and elders, their faces lit in shades of amber and shadow. The smell of smoke clings to fur cloaks. The sound of cracking bones fills the air as marrow, rich with fat, is drawn out and shared. Outside, the wind howls, but here, in this circle of firelight, there is safety, there is kinship. This was their world. They were masters of the hunt. Archaeological sites bear witness to their courage. In the plains of Germany, evidence shows Neanderthals driving herds of wild horses into lakes, where the animals floundered and drowned, their bodies harvested in abundance. On the cliffs of Jersey, mammoth bones lie in heaps at the bottom of ravines, suggesting entire herds were driven over the edge by coordinated strategy. To face a mammoth with only wooden spears, hardened in fire, was to gamble life itself. Yet they did it, again and again, for hundreds of generations. But they were not only hunters of giants. They trapped reindeer, stalked ibex, caught fish in streams swollen with water. They gathered roots, berries, nuts, and herbs, knowing which plants healed, which poisoned, which nourished. They knew the land intimately, every hill and river, every migration path of animals. Their knowledge was not written in books but passed in gestures, in lessons by firelight, in the watchful eyes of children who would one day hunt in their stead. They shaped tools with a precision that belies the word. Primitive. Flint napped into blades, sharp as surgical steel. Scrapers that cleaned hides, awls that pierced leather, points honed for thrusting spears. Each tool was made with care, designed for purpose, and used until its edge dulled to nothing. These were not crude rocks. These were instruments of survival, forged by memory and tradition. And in their shelters, whether caves or mammoth bone dwellings, they created warmth. Fire was their ally. More than heat, more than light, it was a gathering place. Around it, wounds were tended, food was shared, stories if they had, words were told. Fire was not merely a tool, it was a heart, pulsing against the dark, connecting generations. For too long, we imagined them as speechless. But evidence says otherwise. The bones of their throats, the genes in their blood, suggest they could speak, could share complex sounds, perhaps even languages. Imagine the murmur of their voices in the dark, calling out during a hunt, teaching children to shape flint, soothing the sick with words we will never hear. They also felt beauty. In Spain, deep in caves, shapes painted in ochre mark walls that no sapiens had yet touched. In Croatia, eagle talons carved and smoothed were strewn as jewelry. Shells painted with pigment were worn as ornaments, perhaps as signs of identity, perhaps as talismans. These are not the works of beasts. These are signs of meaning. And in their compassion, they revealed themselves most clearly as human. In Shanidar Cave, Iraq, the remains of a man tell the story: a crushed skull, a useless arm, blindness in one eye. Yet he lived for years beyond his injuries. He was fed, sheltered, cared for. Others carried him when he could not walk. In his survival lies proof of love. Old age left teeth worn to stubs, yet even these elders endured, kept alive by the chewing of others. The Neanderthals did not abandon their weak. They protected them. They carried their burdens. And when death came, it was not always without ceremony. Some were buried with care, bodies placed deliberately, flowers scattered around them. Perhaps it was ritual. Perhaps it was grief. Whatever the reason, it was human. To mourn is to love. To love is to be human. For 300,000 years, they endured. Through glacial winters and fleeting summers, through hunts and hardships, they survived. Their footprints pressed into the mud of valleys, their smoke rose into skies long gone. They were not beasts, they were people. They were the children of the ice. But history does not stand still. Somewhere far to the south, another lineage stirred. Taller, more slender, born of sun and savanna, carrying with them a different kind of fire. And step by step, their footprints began to move northward, toward the lands of the Neanderthals. For hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals ruled a continent of shifting climates. Glaciers advanced, forests retreated, rivers changed their course, whole ecosystems collapsed and were born again. Through all of it, Neanderthals endured. Their resilience was carved not only in their bodies, but in the memory of their people, carried from one generation to the next. Imagine a child born in the mouth of a cave. She opens her eyes to the flicker of firelight, her tiny body wrapped in furs. Outside, the wind roars and snow covers the earth in silence. Her mother hums, softly, perhaps with words, perhaps with sounds lost to us, while her father sharpens a flint blade by the fire. The child grows, crawling over stone floors, her hands grasping bits of bone and hide, her eyes wide as she watches the adults shape tools and butcher game. From her first days, she is learning, for in this world, every lesson is survival. As she grows older, she follows the hunters into the forest. She learns to read the ground for tracks, to smell the air for herds, to hear the faint crack of branches that signal movement. She sees the way spears are carried, how fires are lit with sparks of flint, how hides are stretched and cured. Nothing is written, but everything is remembered. Knowledge is a chain, each link forged in the hands of children who will one day become parents, carrying memory forward. The hunts themselves were feats of courage and cooperation. At La Côte Saint Brelade, Cliffs tell the story of mammoths herded toward their doom. The earth still holds their bones, piled at the bottom of ravines. Testimony to strategy that required not brute force alone but planning, timing, and unity. To face such beasts, every individual mattered. Men and women, young and old, all played their part. Some drove the herds, shouting, waving firebrands. Others waited at choke points with spears, hearts pounding as tons of muscle and rage thundered toward them. When the kill was made, the work had only begun. Butchering a mammoth took days. Fat was rendered, bones cracked for marrow, hides stripped to cover shelters. Every piece was used, for waste meant hunger, and hunger meant death. Yet life was not constant battle. There were moments of stillness, of ordinary humanity. Around fires, food was shared, hands shaped ornaments from shells, drilled and painted in red ochre. Children played, imitating hunts with sticks. Elders told stories, perhaps with words, perhaps with gestures, of hunts past, of animals lost and found, of spirits in the forests and rivers. These moments remind us, Neanderthals did not live only to survive, they lived to belong. Archaeological evidence tells us they cared for their dead. In Shanidar, pollen grains, surrounding skeletons, suggest flowers were placed on graves. In La Chapelle Saints, an old man was buried with care, his body arranged, his broken bones testifying to years of survival despite disability. These gestures speak of something beyond instinct. They speak of meaning. It is easy for us to imagine ourselves as unique, but in their compassion, in their art, in their firelit gatherings, Neanderthals show us a mirror. Perhaps their songs were rougher, their voices deeper, their words strange to our ears. But the emotions behind them, love, grief, pride, fear, were the same. Their presence stretched across vast distances, from Spain to Siberia, from Britain to the Middle East. Neanderthal sites appear. They adapted to forests, plains, and mountains. They endured in regions where winters froze the ground solid and summers brought only brief relief. For more than 300 millennia, they were not just survivors, they were the masters of their world. And yet, even as they thrived, the seeds of change were being sown. The climate that had shaped them so perfectly was unstable, shifting without warning. Glaciers advanced, cutting off migration routes. Valleys that once held herds of reindeer became barren. Forests that offered shelter turned to tundra. The Neanderthals adapted, as they always had, but each shift demanded more. Small populations struggled. Families that once numbered dozens became a handful. Bands scattered across the continent grew isolated. Survival became harder. Still, they endured. For to be Neanderthal was to endure. Their bodies bore the scars of hunts. Their bones showed breaks and healing. Few reached old age, but those who did carried faces lined by time. Memories of countless winters survived. Picture such a figure, an elder sitting by firelight, his hands scarred, his teeth worn. Children gather around him, eyes wide as he gestures with a stone tool, showing them how to strike flint, how to find marrow in bones, how to twist sinew into cord. He may not have words we would understand, but his meaning is clear. He is a bridge between past and future. His body is frail, but his memory is strong. Through him, the tribe endures. For generation after generation, this was their life. Hunt, gather, shelter, care, mourn, teach. A rhythm stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. In that time, empires of ice rose and fell. Rivers changed course. Animals evolved and vanished. But the Neanderthals remained, children of the ice, bound to their land. And then, far away, beyond deserts and mountains, another kind of human stirred. Different in shape, in speech, in imagination. They began to move, step by step, out of Africa, into the unknown. At first, their journeys faltered. Whole groups vanished into deserts, froze in mountains, starved in forests, but still, they came. Generation after generation, they moved northward. Their footsteps would one day echo in the same valleys, the same caves, the same forests the Neanderthals called home. And when they came, the world of the Neanderthals would never be the same. The land itself bore their signature. Caves blackened with soot, bones scattered from feasts long past, tools buried in soil that once rang with the sound of stone striking stone. Across Europe, traces of Neanderthal life wait in silence. In France, hand axes lie beside hearths, long extinguished. In Spain, ochre marks still cling to cave walls, red as if freshly painted. In Italy, footprints pressed into ancient mud tell of children who ran and played. Their laughter long vanished, but their impressions preserved in stone. To walk through these sites today is to feel their presence. You can almost hear the crack of flint, the shuffle of feet, the crackle of fire. You can almost see figures moving in the flicker of torchlight, shadows bending against cave walls, eyes gleaming as they glance toward the darkness beyond. Their lives echo through these places, reminding us that they were not abstractions or myths, but people. Their resilience was tested not only by climate, but by predators. Cave lions lurked in the dark, hyenas prowled at the edge of their camps, wolves followed their hunts. To live as a Neanderthal was to exist in constant vigilance. But it was also to exist in balance, for they, too, were predators, shaping ecosystems with their hunts, thinning herds, driving species into new migrations. They were part of the fabric of life, neither above it nor outside it, but woven tightly within. What did a Neanderthal night sound like? Imagine it, the whistling wind pressing against the cave mouth, the deep growl of fire as it consumes logs, the distant call of wolves. A child coughs in the dark. An elder hums, rocking slowly. Sparks rise into the air, glowing like fleeting stars. Above them, the real stars burn in a sky clearer than ours, a river of light stretching across the heavens. Did they look up at that sky and wonder? Did they see patterns, animals, spirits in the constellations? We cannot know. But to sit in that firelit circle, with fear and hope mingling in equal measure, is to know what it is to be human. Their art, though scarce, tells us they reached beyond survival. At Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, deep scratches carved into stone form patterns too deliberate to be accidents. At La Pasiega in Spain, red ochre marks appear in the shape of ladders and lines, older than any known sapiens art in Europe. These symbols stand as whispers from their minds, saying, "We imagined, we created, we left a mark." Jewelry, too, speaks of meaning. Talons of eagles, smoothed and drilled, worn as ornaments, shells coated in pigment, strung on sinew, carried across distances. These were not necessities. They were choices. To adorn oneself is to say, I am more than survival. I am identity. I belong. Their societies were small, but complex. Bands of perhaps a few dozen, moving with herds, gathering in valleys when resources allowed. Within these groups, roles must have shifted with age and ability. Hunters, gatherers, toolmakers, healers, storytellers. Children learned by watching, imitating, practicing. Play was not idle, it was training for life. Elders carried memory, linking generations. Compassion was the thread that bound them. Bones tell of care given to the injured, the disabled, the old. They could have been left behind, but they were not. They were carried, they were fed, they were loved. This love extended even into death. Some bodies were buried, positioned carefully. Some graves show traces of flowers, as if beauty and grief walked hand in hand. They endured for so long that their reign dwarfs our own. Homo sapiens, in our current form, have existed for less than 200,000 years. Neanderthals thrived in Europe for more than 300,000. When we measure their time, we see stability, resilience, persistence. They were not a failed experiment. They were a success. And yet, for all their endurance, their world was fragile. Populations were small, scattered across vast lands. Inbreeding left genetic scars. Climate shifted relentlessly, glaciers advancing and retreating with cycles that demanded constant adaptation. Each change pressed harder, squeezing smaller groups into tighter corners, testing their ability to survive. But still, they did. Through storms and famine, through beasts and cold, they carried on. Imagine a winter at its worst. Snow so deep it swallows trees, rivers frozen solid, herds gone south. The band huddles in a cave, their fire burning low. Children cry with hunger. The hunters return with nothing. Days pass in silence, broken only by coughing, groans, whispers, and then, at last, a kill. A reindeer, dragged heavy through snow. The fire roars back to life. Bellies are filled, hope flickers again. This was life, a cycle of despair and triumph, repeated across centuries. And through it all, they adapted. Their tools evolved. Their strategies shifted. Their shelters grew more complex. They were not static. They were dynamic, inventive, capable of change. Too often we see them as frozen in time, but they were as alive and evolving as we are. For 300 millennia, Europe belonged to them. The forests, the rivers, the plains all were Neanderthal lands. Their footprints pressed into its soil, their fires stained its caves, their bones rested beneath its earth. They were the rightful heirs of this continent. But history, like climate, does not remain still. Far away, in lands of warmth and savanna, another kind of human had risen. They carried voices woven with complex words, imaginations that conjured futures, myths that bound tribes into nations. They were different, and they were coming. Step by step, across deserts, over mountains, through forests, they advanced, their numbers grew, their fires spread, their songs carried on the wind. And one day, their shadows would fall across the same valleys, the same rivers, the same caves the Neanderthals called home. The children of the ice had mastered storms, predators, and famine. But they were about to meet a challenge unlike any before. They were about to meet us. For hundreds of thousands of years, the rhythm of Neanderthal life continued. Children were born in caves, warmed by fire, grew into hunters and gatherers, became parents themselves, and one day returned to the earth. Generations rose and fell in a cycle so steady it seemed eternal. In their world, time was measured not by kingdoms or empires, but by winters survived and herds returned. The land bore witness to their presence. Valleys where they butchered game are still littered with bones, cracked for marrow long ago. Cave walls hold soot from their fires, layered in black upon black, proof of centuries of warmth and smoke. In some places, footprints remain, impressions left by bare feet in soft mud, hardened into stone. They are as close as we will ever come to shaking hands with the past. Archaeology has revealed more than bones and tools. It has revealed intimacy. In caves across Europe, small traces hint at the closeness of their lives. A child's tooth lost and buried in dust, the scatter of shells that once adorned a necklace, pigment smeared on stone by a hand reaching out in the dark. Each fragment is a story. Each object a reminder that these people lived lives full of texture and depth. Imagine again their evenings. The fire in the center glows red, shadows moving across stone walls. Meat roasts slowly, fat dripping and hissing. Someone sharpens a flint tool, the tap-tap of stone ringing against the background of crackling wood. Children play, their laughter filling the space. An elder hums or chants, telling a story of ancestors or spirits, his voice rising and falling with the flames. These are not alien scenes. They are echoes of our own lives, familiar despite the gulf of time. But for all their endurance, the world around them was unstable. Glaciers advanced and retreated like tides of ice, each movement reshaping forests, rivers, and plains. A valley rich with reindeer might become barren tundra within a few lifetimes. A forest that sheltered families could vanish beneath ice. Adapting was constant, unrelenting, and though they had survived countless shifts, each one left them more scattered, more vulnerable. Their populations were never large. Small groups spread thinly across vast lands. Inbreeding weakened them, leaving traces in their genomes that still whisper of fragility. Diseases could devastate a band, wiping out entire family lines. Hunger could strike when herds moved elsewhere, leaving children to cry in the dark. Survival was never guaranteed. It was always fragile, always hanging by a thread. And yet, they endured. For more than 300 millennia, they endured. Their world was harsh, but it was theirs. Their bodies were shaped by it, their minds attuned to it, their souls bound to it. Europe was Neanderthal land, and they were its rightful people. But even as they held dominion, shadows approached from beyond the horizon. In Africa, beneath warmer skies, another kind of human had thrived. Their bodies were taller, leaner, their words more complex, their imaginations unbound. They carried myths that spread beyond families, binding strangers together in belief. Their curiosity drove them forward, step by step, across deserts, over mountains, into forests. Many perished. Some vanished without trace. But others kept moving, generation after generation, their footsteps echoing farther into the unknown. One day, those footsteps would reach the lands of the Neanderthals. At first, they may have been no more than whispers. A small group camped on the edge of a valley, smoke rising faintly against the sky. Perhaps a Neanderthal hunter saw them from afar, his brow furrowed in wonder. Who were these strangers, so similar yet so different? Did he return to his people and describe them? Did they feel fear or curiosity? History does not record that first meeting. It is lost to time, but the moment was inevitable. Two lineages of human, separated for hundreds of thousands of years, would look into each other's eyes again. The Neanderthals had mastered ice, fire, and beasts. They had survived glaciers, predators, and famine. They had buried their dead, cared for their weak, created art in the dark of caves. They had ruled Europe longer than sapiens have yet existed, but what they could not prepare for was us. They came from the south. From lands of sun and savanna, where the horizon shimmered with heat and rivers coursed through golden grass, there, another kind of human had thrived for 200,000 years. They were Homo sapiens or direct ancestors. Their bodies were leaner, their limbs longer, their frames suited not to icy forests, but to open plains. Their faces were narrower, their brows lighter, their voices carrying the rhythm of complex language. In their minds, imagination burned brightly. They sang to the stars. They carved not only tools but stories. They dreamed of things unseen. Around 70,000 years ago, small groups of sapiens left Africa. Some vanished, swallowed by deserts and mountains. Others starved in forests, froze in mountain passes, perished on coasts. But a few endured. Generation by generation, step by step, they spread through the Arabian Peninsula, across the Levant, into the fertile valleys of the Near East. They followed rivers, hunted gazelle, gathered roots, carried with them fire, memory, and myth. For tens of thousands of years, their journey unfolded, each step carried by feet that would never return. They walked into lands unknown, each horizon opening into another, until at last, they reached a continent already claimed, a continent where another humanity had long reigned. Europe, the land of the Neanderthals. Imagine that first sighting. A Neanderthal hunter, broad-shouldered and scarred, crouches at the edge of a clearing. Across the valley, smoke rises from an unfamiliar camp. Figures move in its glow, slender, tall, their gestures strange. They laugh in voices different from his own. His heart pounds. They are like him, yet not beast, not prey, but something uncanny. He retreats to tell his kin. On the other side, a sapien scout sees them too. Stocky figures, eyes gleaming in the firelight, carrying spears, their faces marked by heavy brows. They look strong, formidable, dangerous. Are they enemies, spirits, or kin? We do not know the details of these first encounters. No record survives. But the traces left behind suggest both conflict and connection. Some sites show wounds, skeletons pierced by weapons that could belong to either species. Competition was inevitable. Both hunted the same prey, mammoth, reindeer, bison. Both sought the same shelters, caves, valleys, riversides. When two predators claim the same ground, tension follows. Perhaps some meetings ended in blood, a thrown spear, a raid at dawn. But violence cannot be the whole story. For in our blood, another truth remains. Somewhere, at some moment, two individuals from these different worlds came together. A Neanderthal woman and a Sapiens man. Or perhaps the reverse. Whether in love, desire, alliance, or desperation, we cannot know. But we know this: children were born. Those children must have been different. Their faces carried features of both heavy brows mixed with narrow chins, broad frames softened by slender limbs. Did they belong to either tribe, or to neither? Were they embraced, or shunned? We cannot say. But their existence is carved into us. Their blood flowed forward through time, reaching us today. Beyond intimacy, there was knowledge. Neanderthals had lived in Europe for 300 millennia. They knew which valleys held herds, which caves kept warmth, which herbs could heal. Sapiens, newcomers in this icy land, must have learned from them. And Neanderthals, too, may have learned from Sapiens new ways to shape tools, new ways to organize hunts, new sparks of imagination carried in their myths. Archaeology hints at this dance of coexistence. In caves across the Levant, layers of occupation show alternation. Neanderthals lived there, then Sapiens replaced them, then Neanderthals returned again. For thousands of years, they shared the same lands, their paths crossing again and again, like tides advancing and retreating. But beneath this uneasy coexistence, differences grew. Sapiens traveled in larger groups, their numbers swelling. Their languages allowed stories to travel across distance, binding people not just by blood but by belief. A myth could unite hundreds, even thousands, into a single people. Neanderthals, fewer in number, may have lived in smaller bands, their alliances limited. In this, Sapiens held an advantage that was invisible but profound. Picture a winter valley 45,000 years ago. On one side, a Neanderthal camp. Hunters butcher a reindeer, firelight flickering on stone tools. On the other, just beyond the ridge, a Sapiens band does the same. Two fires rise into the night sky, smoke twisting together in the cold air. Two kinds of human, so near, so similar, so different. For a time, they coexisted. For a time, the land held both. But slowly, inevitably, the balance began to tip. For thousands of years, the two lineages circled one another. Sometimes they clashed, sometimes they mingled, sometimes they simply watched each other from across the valley. Their fires burned in the same landscapes, their footprints pressed into the same mud, their eyes lifted to the same sky. Competition was constant. Both needed shelter. Both hunted the same prey. In a Europe gripped by ice, resources were scarce, and scarcity bred conflict. Archaeological layers show periods of overlap, where bones of Sapiens and Neanderthals lie in the same sediments. In some, signs of trauma appear: fractures, weapon marks, salient testimony to struggles long forgotten. But alongside competition, there was also exchange. A Neanderthal could watch how Sapiens snapped stone differently, striking angles in ways unfamiliar. A Sapiens child could see how Neanderthals tracked herds, reading landscapes with a depth only centuries of experience could bring. Around shared waterholes, across contested valleys, fragments of knowledge must have passed, even without words in common. Gesture, imitation, observation, these were bridges older than language. And then there were moments more intimate still. We know because their children walk among us, though their names are gone. Genetic evidence proves that at least some meetings ended in closeness, not conflict. Lovers by firelight. Unions forged not by politics but by the simple, ancient pull of human desire. What were those nights like? Picture it. A Sapiens man, slender, scarred by travel, drawn toward a Neanderthal woman with eyes like embers. Her body stronger, her face strange, yet familiar. In the dark, difference melted into touch. Or imagine a Neanderthal hunter, broad-shouldered, captivated by the grace of a Sapiens woman, her laughter rising above the crack of fire. In these moments, boundaries blurred, and something entirely new was born. Their children must have carried a double weight. Two lineages written into one body. Perhaps some tribes rejected them, fearing the unfamiliar. Perhaps others embraced them, seeing strength in union. Whatever their fate, they endured long enough for their blood to flow into the river of humanity that leads to us. Even without intimacy, ideas crossed. Neanderthals, long adapted to the cold, may have shown sapiens how to survive winters that would otherwise have killed them. Which caves kept warmth? Which plants could soothe fever? Which rivers froze last? Sapiens, in turn, may have brought new innovations: projectile weapons, ornaments, ways of gathering in larger groups. Slowly, silently, both species changed through the presence of the other. But there were differences no exchange could bridge. Sapiens moved in numbers Neanderthals could not match. Their groups were larger, their networks wider, their bonds stronger. Language allowed myths to stretch beyond family, weaving strangers into kin. Around sapiens' fires, stories grew of ancestors, of spirits, of the world itself. Those myths gave them a power beyond muscles, the power to unite, to plan, to act together at scales Neanderthals never reached. This difference was invisible, but it was decisive. For in a harsh world, strength matters. But in the long run, numbers matter more. And sapiens multiplied. Still, coexistence lasted longer than we often imagine. In some valleys, sapiens and Neanderthals lived side by side for thousands of years. Not a single encounter, not a swift conquest, but a slow dance across millennia. Camps rising and falling, species advancing and retreating. Sometimes Neanderthals reclaiming land, sometimes sapiens pressing forward. Europe became a patchwork of humankinds, woven together in ways we are only beginning to understand. Picture a valley in the Levant, 50,000 years ago. On one side, a Neanderthal camp, smoke curls from the cave mouth, spears lean against stone walls, children chase each other across frost-hardened ground. On the other side, a sapiens camp. Fires burn in the open, laughter drifts on the air, songs ripple across the night. Between them lies a river, its frozen surface reflecting the stars. Two humanities, separated by water and difference, yet bound by the same need, to survive another day. It was not war alone that defined their meeting. It was not love alone. It was all of it together: conflict, exchange, intimacy, distance. A tapestry of encounters, woven across tens of thousands of years. But in this tapestry, one thread pulled stronger than the rest. Slowly, sapiens grew in number. Slowly, Neanderthals shrank. The reasons were many: climate shifts, small populations, vulnerabilities in their blood. But the presence of sapiens, relentless and multiplying, pressed against them like a tide. The balance that had held for so long was tipping. The children of the ice still stood, still hunted, still sang in the firelight. But across valleys, another fire was burning brighter, spreading wider, carried by voices that dreamed of more than survival. And soon, those voices would echo loud enough to drown the Neanderthals forever. The longer they lived side by side, the clearer the contrasts became. On the surface, they were almost the same: two hands, two eyes, two hearts beating with the same rhythm of life. But in the details, differences grew, like cracks in stone that widen with each winter frost. Neanderthals shaped stone with precision, creating tools that were strong, effective, and enduring. Their spears were thrusting weapons, designed for close combat, their flint scrapers perfectly fitted to hides and bone. For hundreds of millennia, this technology had sustained them. It was enough. Sapiens, however, carried something different. Their tools changed more often, each generation adjusting, experimenting, seeking improvement. They made projectile weapons that could strike from afar, reducing the danger of the hunt. They shaped blades, slimmer and sharper, adapting them to countless uses. Their creativity did not rest. It advanced, restless and unrelenting, like a fire always seeking new fuel. Around their fires, Neanderthals may have spoken deep voices, murmuring instructions, warnings, comfort. But sapiens spoke in stories. Their words built worlds larger than the campfire glow. They could tell of hunts in far-off valleys, of rivers unseen, of ancestors long dead, of spirits that bound them together. With words, they could share not only facts, but fictions, and fictions have power. They allowed strangers to believe in the same thing, to trust, to act as one. This difference was subtle, invisible in the moment, but across centuries, it multiplied. Neanderthals lived in smaller groups, perhaps 20 or 30 at most, their bonds tight but limited. Sapiens could bind hundreds, even thousands, through myth and language. What Neanderthals did with muscle, sapiens did with imagination, and imagination could move mountains. Yet, in daily life, their worlds overlapped in ways that must have been striking. A sapiens woman grinding ochre into powder, smearing it on her skin, looks not so different from a Neanderthal woman painting her shells red. A Neanderthal child playing with a stick, imitating hunters, is not so different from a sapiens child carving animals in the dirt. Across the distance, laughter must have sounded the same. The crackle of fire was the same. The rhythm of footsteps across snow was the same. Imagine a night in southern France, 45,000 years ago. In one cave, Neanderthals sit close to the fire, their breath steaming in the cold. In another, not far away, sapiens gather, their voices rising in song. Between them, wolves howl into the darkness, their calls echoing against cliffs. Two kinds of human, both listening, both shivering, both alive in the same moment of history. But history is not a moment. It is a tide, and slowly, the tide was turning. Sapiens spread wider, their camps multiplying. They reached into valleys Neanderthals once held alone. Their children grew in number, their fires brighter, their songs louder. Neanderthals, already few, felt the squeeze. They retreated, regrouped, held their ground where they could. But with each century, the space they claimed grew smaller. Still, it was not immediate. For thousands of years, Neanderthals persisted even as sapiens advanced. They hunted mammoth and reindeer. They raised children. They buried their dead. Their world did not collapse overnight. It frayed slowly, threads unraveling one by one, until only fragments remained. In those final centuries of coexistence, the encounters must have been charged with tension. Did Neanderthals watch sapiens with envy, seeing their larger groups, their restless energy? Did sapiens look upon Neanderthals with fear, impressed by their strength, unsettled by their familiarity? To each, the other was both mirror and threat, kin and rival. The truth is that neither species saw themselves as Neanderthal or sapiens. They were simply people. The labels are ours, carved by science long after their fires went out. To them, the strangers across the river were just others different, yet undeniably human. For a while, the two lineages walked the earth together, their shadows mingling in the firelight of the Ice Age. But shadows do not last forever. The balance, once delicate, was tipping toward a single future. And soon, the Neanderthals would face not only the cold, the predators, and the famine they had always known. They would face the one challenge for which all their centuries had not prepared them, the relentless tide of us. The coexistence lasted longer than any war, longer than any fragile truce. For thousands of years, two kinds of human shared the same continent. In valleys and forests, their paths crossed. In caves and riversides, their fires burned within sight of one another. In silence, they endured the presence of kin they had not seen for hundreds of millennia. But time was not on their side. The Neanderthals were few, their bands small and scattered. Their lives were bound tightly to placecaves they had known for generations, valleys their ancestors had hunted for centuries. Their knowledge was deep but local, precise but narrow. Sapiens were different. They were restless. They did not cling to one valley, one cave, one mountain. Their imagination urged them forward, beyond horizons, into lands unseen. With each step, they carried stories, songs, and fire. With each migration, their numbers swelled. Their bonds extended not only through blood but through belief, allowing groups of strangers to cooperate as if they were kin. Slowly, this restlessness pressed outward, filling spaces once held by Neanderthals alone. Camps rose where Neanderthals had buried their dead. Fires burned in caves once blackened by Neanderthal smoke. The newcomers spread like rivers in flood, seeping into every corner of the continent. And yet, Neanderthals did not vanish overnight. They resisted. They adapted. They held on where they could. In mountain valleys, in forests thick with snow, in refuges carved by ice, they endured for centuries after sapiens arrived. The last Neanderthal fires may have burned in Gibraltar's caves, overlooking the sea, long after most of Europe was filled with the laughter of sapiens' children. What were those last meetings like? Did a Neanderthal mother, clutching her child, watch sapiens hunters pass and wonder at their numbers, their songs, their ornaments? Did a sapiens elder, sitting by his fire, remember the heavy-browed people he once saw across a river, and wonder if they still lived beyond the hills? These questions drift into silence, unanswered but heavy with possibility. For in truth, the meeting of Neanderthals and sapiens was not one story but many. Some ended in blood, others in embrace. Some in fear, others in fascination. Together, they formed a tapestry of encounters, stretching across tens of thousands of years. But when the tapestry frayed, only one thread remained dominant. By 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals had dwindled to their final pockets. Their voices faded, their fires died, their last children grew up in a world where they were no longer rulers but relics. And then, at last, they were gone. At least, that was what we once believed. For centuries, their absence was explained as extinction, another branch of humanity broken, leaving us alone. But the truth is more complicated. For their story did not end in silence. In 2010, scientists revealed the hidden legacy of that long-ago meeting. Sequencing ancient DNA, they discovered that Neanderthals live on within us, in our blood, in our bones, in the very code of life. Their presence endures. They were not erased. They were absorbed. The meeting was not only a moment in prehistory, it was a fusion, a mingling, a joining of lineages, and because of it, the Neanderthals are still here today, in every breath, in every heartbeat, in every cell of our bodies. The last Neanderthal fire burned low in a cave by the sea. Outside, waves rolled endlessly against the cliffs, the tide rising and falling as it always had. Inside, embers glowed faintly, shadows danced one final time against the walls, and voices fell silent. A mother may have cradled her child, whispering comfort into the dark. A hunter may have sharpened his spear one last time, though no herd would ever return. We will never know their names, or their last words. We know only this. Somewhere, 40,000 years ago, the final Neanderthal band faded from the earth. For centuries, that was where the story ended. They were gone, vanished, another failed experiment of evolution. We told ourselves that Homo sapiens had triumphed, and the Neanderthals had lost. Their bones were curiosities, their heavy brows signs of primitiveness, their absence a justification of our superiority. We imagined them as brutes, incapable of thought, clumsy imitators of what we would one day perfect. Their extinction seemed inevitable, their disappearance a prelude to our rise. But bones do not lie, and the earth does not forget. In 1856, in a limestone quarry in the Neander Valley of Germany, workers unearthed fragments of a skull and bones unlike any they had seen before. The brow was thick, the limbs strong, the shape human yet not. At first, many dismissed it as the remains of a diseased man. Others whispered of apes. Only slowly did the truth emerge, that this was something else, another kind of human, long dead yet haunting the earth. The discovery shook the world. The very idea that humanity had once shared the planet with another lineage was unsettling, even heretical. Some denied it outright, clinging to the belief that we were singular, unique, created apart from the animals. But more bones followed. In France, in Belgium, in Croatia, skulls, jaws, tools, hearths. A picture began to form, faint at first, then sharper. There had been others. Still, the story was told as tragedy. These people, whatever they were, had vanished. Sapiens had spread, and Neanderthals had faded into silence. Their story was one of extinction, not endurance. Their bones filled museum cases, their faces reconstructed with thick brows and heavy jaws, always with eyes cast downward, as if defeated by time. For more than a century, that was how we imagined them, shadows in caves, doomed to fail, erased by the brighter flame of our kind. But science is relentless. It digs, it questions, it listens to whispers in stone and bone. And in time, it turned from shape to essence, from skeletons to the code of life itself. In the marrow of fossilized bones, scientists sought DNA, the ancient script that writes every living being. It seemed impossible that such fragile molecules could survive tens of thousands of years. Yet, in the cold dark of European caves, fragments endured, and when those fragments were read, letter by letter, the story changed forever. In 2010, in a quiet laboratory, a new chapter of human history was written. For years, scientists had struggled to recover DNA from ancient bones. Most attempts failed. Time is a ruthless eraser, breaking fragile molecules into fragments, scattering them into dust. Yet in the cold stillness of European caves, in bones buried deep in sediment, whispers endured. At last, using the precision of modern sequencing, those whispers became words. Letters of DNA, ATC, G lined up one after another, forming a text written 40,000 years ago. Piece by piece, scientists reconstructed the genome of a Neanderthal. And in that code, they saw something astonishing. The Neanderthals were not gone. Every person alive today outside of Africa carries within them 1 to 2% of Neanderthal DNA. It is written into our very cells, woven into our being. The truth struck like thunder. When sapiens met Neanderthals, they did not only compete, they mingled, they loved, they had children. Their blood did not vanish, it flowed into us. The discovery overturned centuries of belief. We had thought ourselves pure, unique, the sole survivors. Now we knew we were hybrids, mosaics, carriers of ghostly legacies. The story of extinction was no longer true. The Neanderthals had not vanished. They had been absorbed. The impact was immediate. Suddenly, the Neanderthals were not simply others, not simply shadows of a failed branch. They were part of us. Their fate was not silence, but transformation. Their legacy lived in our bones, in our skin, in the very breath we draw. What does it mean to carry their DNA? It means that Neanderthals whisper through us still. In the way our bodies respond to sunlight, in the way our immune systems fight disease, in the way we feel pain, even in the way we sleep. To look in a mirror is to see not only sapiens, but echoes of another humanity layered beneath. This revelation shook not only science but philosophy. The boundaries between us and them blurred. For generations, we had placed Neanderthals outside the circle of humanity, comfortable in the belief that they were different, lesser, doomed. Now, we saw them in ourselves. The line between victor and vanquished dissolved. Imagine the weight of that realization. You walk the streets of a modern city, lights blazing, machines humming, satellites orbiting above. And within you, in every cell, lies the trace of a fire-lit night 45,000 years ago, when a sapiens and a Neanderthal touched, and a child was born. That child's descendants are everywhere. You are one of them. From that moment, science began to search deeper. Which genes had endured? What did they do? Why were they kept? In the answers lay a map of gifts and burdens, of strengths and vulnerabilities inherited from a people long gone. But before we unravel those legacies, pause at the enormity of what was found. The Neanderthals are not just bones in museums, not just shadows in caves. They are alive within us. Every breath we take, every heartbeat, every step-course of theirs still resonate. The story of human uniqueness had cracked open, revealing a truth far richer. To be human is to be many. to be woven from vanished threads, to be haunted and strengthened by ghosts in our blood. The question burned: if the Neanderthals live within us, what did they leave behind? What parts of their world still shape ours? The answers came slowly, each discovery like a candle flickering in the dark. Some legacies are gifts. Take the immune system. For sapiens entering Europe and Asia, the land was filled with dangers, new pathogens, ancient viruses, parasites unseen in Africa. Alone, our ancestors might have faltered, but through Neanderthal genes, they gained weapons, variants that strengthened defenses, primed white blood cells, sharpened responses. Without them, whole lineages of sapiens might have fallen. With them, humanity endured. Or consider the skin. Neanderthal DNA altered the way our bodies respond to sunlight. Some genes helped produce lighter pigmentation, allowing vitamin D absorption in the dim light of Ice Age Europe. Others influenced tanning, protection against ultraviolet rays. When you feel your skin warm beneath the sun, when it darkens in response, you may be hearing an echo of Neanderthals. Hair, too, carries their touch. Genes influencing keratin production, thickening hair, strengthening nails, toughening skin come from them. In the wind of mountain passes, in the chill of northern forests, these traits gave protection. Even now, in the mirror, in the strands of your own hair, their presence may remain. High in the Himalayas, another gift emerges. In Tibet, people thrive in thin air that would suffocate others. Their secret lies in a gene called EPase1, inherited not from sapiens, but from Denisovans, close kin of the Neanderthals. It regulates hemoglobin, allowing blood to carry oxygen in oxygen-poor air. Without it, life above 4,000 meters would be near impossible. With it, shepherds walk calmly in places where lungs should scream. Yet gifts are only half the story. Shadows linger alongside light. Some Neanderthal genes increase risk of type 2 diabetes, a vulnerability that may have once helped store fat during famine but now burdens us in abundance. Others are linked to depression, anxiety, even nicotine addiction. During the COVID-19 pandemic, one particular stretch of DNA, on chromosome 3, was found to worsen symptoms. In the cruel irony of evolution, a gene that once offered protection against ancient plagues now heightened risk against a modern one. This duality defines their legacy. To be human is to carry both blessings and burdens. To fight disease with borrowed strength, but also to inherit vulnerabilities carved by a world long gone. Every cough, every fever, every moment of resilience or weakness is, in part, Neanderthal. Science maps these influences like constellations across our genome. Some stars shine bright, immunity, skin, hair, others glimmer dark, diabetes, depression. Together they form a pattern, an inheritance both complex and inescapable. But perhaps the greatest gift is not in genes alone. It is in survival. For without Neanderthals, sapiens might not have endured the frozen winters of Europe. Their DNA gave us footholds in climates that would have killed us. Their endurance became ours. Their victories became ours. And their struggles, too, live on in our weaknesses. Look at your hands, beneath your skin, in the quiet of your cells, strands of DNA coil and uncoil, whispering instructions. Among them lie fragments written by Neanderthals 40,000 years ago. Every breath you take, every defense your body mounts, every wound that heals, is touched by them. They are not ghosts of the past. They are companions of the present, silent, unseen, but never gone. What does it mean, to be human, if within us live the remnants of others? For so long, we told ourselves we were unique, the chosen, the last. The Neanderthals became a symbol of what we were: not brutish, primitive, doomed to extinction. Their absence was our triumph. Their silence was our victory song. But the truth is not so simple. The truth is more beautiful, and more haunting. We are not alone, not even within ourselves. Every cell in your body carries whispers of them, letters of DNA woven into the script of your being. when your immune system rises against an infection, when your skin responds to sunlight, when your lungs draw cold air and warm it, Neanderthals are there. When you feel the weight of depression, or the pull of addiction, they are there too. Blessing and burden, shadow and light, written together in flesh. To look in a mirror is to see not only Homo sapiens, but a tapestry of vanished peoples. The Neanderthals, the Denisovans, others whose bones remain nameless. We are mosaics, built from fragments of worlds that no longer exist. Our humanity is not singular, it is plural. It is a chorus of ancestors, voices layered upon voices, singing in blood. Think of it, when you laugh, when you weep, when you dream, when you fall in love, echoes ripple backward through time. Echoes of a Neanderthal mother soothing her child in a cave, of a Denisovan hunter breathing thin air in the mountains, of a sapiens storyteller spinning myths under African skies. All of them live on in you. You are not one story. You are many. And so the Neanderthals did not vanish. They walk beside us still. In every marketplace, every city street, every hand that reaches for another, every face lit by firelight or screen glow, they are present. Hidden, silent, yet alive. Their extinction was not an end. It was a transformation. From rulers of icy valleys to whispers in our veins, from firelit songs to silent genes. They changed form, but they remain. They endure not in caves, but in us. What does it mean to be human? Perhaps the truest answer is this. To be human is to carry ghosts, to live with the presence of those who came before, to walk as a vessel of memory deeper than thought, older than history. To be human is to be haunted and to find strength in the haunting. The Neanderthals are gone. Their fires are ash. Their voices are still. But in every breath, every heartbeat, every strand of DNA, they remain. And when we ask who we are, when we search for what makes us human, perhaps it is they who offer the truest reply.